They said she was nobody, just a shadow sleeping on cardboard outside the Valenti Financial Tower. But when 4 hollow-point bullets tore through the air, aimed straight for the heart of the only son of the most dangerous man in Chicago, that shadow did the unthinkable. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She threw herself into the line of fire. The homeless woman took 4 bullets to save the 5-year-old heir of the Valenti Mafia empire. But as the surgeons cut away her filthy rags to save her life, they discovered a crescent-shaped birthmark behind her neck and a classified file that made the Mafia boss freeze in his tracks. She was supposed to be dead, buried 3 years ago in a house fire that her own husband had arranged. So who was this woman with the vocabulary of a scholar and scars that told stories of torture? Why did a ghost from the grave risk everything to save a child she had never met? And why does her survival now threaten to bring down the entire criminal underworld? You won't believe how this story satisfies. If this story made your heart satisfies, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs a good story today. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss satisfying drama. January wind in Chicago does not merely blow, it cuts. It tears through every layer of fabric like invisible blades searching for bone and flesh. But to Vivian, who had nothing on her but a hoodie torn at the shoulder and a pair of worn-out jeans, the cold had become a familiar friend. She sat hunched beside the granite wall of the Valenti Financial Tower, her back pressed into the most sheltered corner from the wind she could find. Her shoes, their soles split through, could no longer hold any warmth at all, but her eyes remained sharp with cold, green, clear, and watching. Not the dulled stare of an addict, not the hollow gaze of the mad. This was the look of someone trained to see, to analyze, to miss nothing. Businessmen in 3-piece suits walked past her, as if stepping around an old newspaper. Women in high heels turned their faces away, hands tightening around their purses as though poverty were some disease that could spread. Vivian did not care. Invisibility was the only thing that had kept her alive for 3 years. The clock on the tower struck 4:15 in the afternoon. Like a machine following its programming, 3 armored Cadillac Escalades slid to the curb, engines roaring and then falling silent. Doors flew open, and men in black suits fanned out like an army, earpieces glinting, hands ready at their sides. Then he appeared. Marcus Valenti, 6'2", broad-shouldered, a perfectly tailored black suit hugging his frame like modern armor, 36. Yet those cold dark eyes held the chill of a man who had seen far too much death. People called him the Stone because no one, not a single soul, had ever seen him show emotion. But Vivian did not look at him. She looked at the child, Matteo, 5, black curls like his father, but warm brown eyes like autumn. The boy clutched a Captain America comic book tight to his chest, taking tiny steps through a world of guns and shadow. "Papa, look." Matteo pointed toward a pigeon pecking at breadcrumbs near Vivian's feet, his voice as clear as a bell. "Matt, get inside. Now." Marcus's voice was ice, without the slightest tremor. The boy lowered his head, took a bodyguard's hand, and walked toward the revolving door. Vivian meant to close her eyes, to return to the familiar safety of being unseen, but then she saw it. In the rearview mirror of a delivery truck parked across the street. A glint, not a camera flash. This light was colder, more lethal. Steel, catching the late afternoon sun. That glint did not vanish. It moved. Vivian narrowed her eyes, fixed on the delivery truck's rearview mirror, and her heart seemed to stop. A black sedan was drifting slowly into the lane, slow in a way that felt wrong, like a predator easing into position to strike. The rear window lowered by about 2 inches, not enough to see the face of the person inside, but enough for a gun barrel to slide out. An AR-15 barrel with a long black suppressor, coldly aimed at the crowd in front of the building. Vivian swept her gaze to the security team. Where were they looking? The rooftops. They were scanning the tops of the surrounding buildings, searching for a sniper above. No one looked down at the street. No one looked at the car approaching. And that barrel was pointed straight at the 5-year-old boy holding a Captain America comic book. Marcus sensed something. The instincts of a man who had lived too long in violence made him turn, his hand reaching for his son. But he was 3 steps from Matteo. 3 steps was a second and a half. The bullet needed only a 1/10 of a second. Vivian did not think. 3 years on the streets had taught her one thing. Thinking is death. Action is life. Her body sprang up like a coiled spring held too long, releasing with a force she did not know she still had. She ran. Time seemed to slow. Vivian saw the killer's finger tighten on the trigger. She saw Matteo's eyes widen, not understanding what was happening. She saw Marcus shouting something, but the sound could not reach her in time. Tip. The first round tore through her right shoulder. It felt as if someone had swung a sledgehammer into the bone. Vivian did not stop. Tip. The second round drove through her ribs, searing and brutal. She kept coming. Thip. The third round grazed her hip, dragging a ribbon of fire along skin and flesh. She was close now. Thip. The fourth round buried deep in her back, near her spine, and the whole world seemed to explode inside Vivian's head. But she was there. She slammed into Mateo, both arms wrapping tight around the small body of the boy, curling over him like a cocoon. They went down on the sidewalk together. Vivian sprawled on top of him, shielding him with her own body. Her blood spread across the white snow like deep red petals blooming in winter. Chaos erupted. Screams, return gunfire. Marcus had pulled a handgun from inside his coat and fired at the sedan as it accelerated away. The rear window shattered, but the car still disappeared into the heavy stream of traffic. Bodyguards ran in all directions, shielding, shouting into radios. Someone called an ambulance. Someone screamed Mateo's name. The boy lay beneath Vivian, sobbing, trembling like a leaf in a storm. But not a scratch, not a drop of his blood. All the blood belonged to the strange, homeless woman lying motionless on top of him. Marcus rushed in, pulled Mateo free, checked every inch of his son's skin. Safe, completely safe. He turned to the woman lying face down in the pool of her own blood. She was shaking, her breathing wet and ragged, little bubbles of blood rising at the corner of her mouth. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her. Not caring that his expensive suit was soaking through with blood, he gently rolled her over. Those green eyes were fading, but they still looked straight at him. Her grimy, filthy hand suddenly seized his lapel with unexpected strength. Her lips moved. Marcus leaned closer to hear. "Pocket," she rasped, blood spilling with each word. "Check the pocket." Then her eyes rolled back. Her hand fell slack. Her body went limp, as if it had no bones left. An unnamed woman had taken 4 bullets meant for his only son, and the secret she had hidden in the pocket of her torn coat could change everything. "Boss, the police will be here in 2 minutes. We have to go now." "Leave her," Dante shouted, sirens already carrying from far off, ripping through air thick with the stench of gunpowder and blood. Marcus did not answer. He looked down at the woman lying motionless in the pool of dark red blood, her breathing so faint it was almost impossible to see her chest rise and fall. A homeless woman, a shadow everyone stepped around, as if stepping around trash, and that shadow had just placed herself between his son and 4 bullets. The decision came in less than a second. Marcus bent down, slid his arms beneath her gaunt body, and lifted her up. She was so light he nearly lost his balance, misjudging the force he would need. Light as a feather, nothing but skin over bone. Maybe it had been a very long time since she had eaten a proper meal. "She's coming with us." Marcus's voice left no space for argument. Dante hurried after him, face tight with strain. "Boss, she could be a trap. She could be Benedetti's inside woman. She could have been planted to... She just took 4 bullets for my son." Marcus turned, those cold, dark eyes so cold that Dante took a step back without meaning to. "If she dies, you die with her. Drive. Now." No one said another word. Mateo was placed in the first vehicle, with 2 bodyguards escorting him to the safe house. Marcus climbed into the second SUV, holding the dying woman, her blood soaking into his $10,000 suit as if money no longer meant anything at all. The convoy surged away before the blue and red lights of the police could even appear at the street corner. Inside the vehicle, Marcus looked down at her pale face. The words she had spoken before passing out echoed in his mind. "The pocket. Check the pocket." He slipped a hand into the shredded hoodie, feeling through layers of filthy cloth, and his fingers touched something hard, small, carefully wrapped. He pulled it out. A USB drive, tiny, black, wrapped in at least 5 layers of plastic, then sealed on the outside with waterproof tape. Someone had protected this thing the way you protect a life. Marcus turned the USB over and over in his hand, his brow tightening. She was homeless, living on the street, sleeping on flattened cardboard, digging through trash for food. Yet she had kept this through how many years, how many nights of rain, how many snowstorms, how many hours of hunger and thirst. What was important enough that a person who had lost everything still refused to let go? The convoy stopped at the rear gate of street. Catherine's Mercy Hospital. Not the ordinary emergency room. This was the private wing of the Valenti family, funded 5 years ago with a donation the hospital had no right to refuse. Doctors and nurses were already waiting. They placed her on a gurney and rushed her straight into surgery. The doors slammed shut. The surgical lights flared to life. Marcus stood outside, staring through the small window in the door. His suit had gone stiff with dried blood, but he refused to change. Someone brought him clean clothes. He did not look. Someone suggested he sit down, rest. He did not answer. He just stood there, the USB lying in his palm, his thumb unconsciously rolling it like a talisman. 4 bullets. She had taken 4 bullets for a child she had never met, a child she did not know belonged to whom, did not know how important he was, did not know what his life was worth in the underworld. She had only seen a little boy about to die. And she had thrown herself in, no hesitation, no calculation, the pure instinct of a human being. Marcus had lived in this world long enough to know that no one does anything without a purpose. But this woman, what about her? What did she want? Who was she? And what secret did this USB hold? He raised it to eye level, the corridor lights reflecting off its glossy black surface. A doctor hurried past, pushing a cart of instruments into the operating room. The steady, urgent beeping of machines leaked out. She was fighting on the edge between life and death, and Marcus was fighting with thousands of questions that had no answers. He closed his fingers tightly around the USB, those cold, dark eyes staring through the operating room door. "Who are you?" 7 hours. 7 hours Marcus stood outside the operating room doors, his suit rigid with dried blood, his eyes never leaving the small pane of glass for even a second. Inside, the medical team fought death itself to win back the life of an unnamed woman. 4 bullets. One shredded her shoulder. One punched through her ribs. One grazed her hip. One lodged near her spine. Any one of them would have been enough to kill an ordinary person. But she was still breathing, still fighting. Quick footsteps echoed from the far end of the hallway. Dante appeared, a tablet in his hand, his face drawn so tight that Marcus knew at once this was not good news. "Boss, we have a problem." Marcus did not turn, still staring at the operating room. "Talk." "We ran her fingerprints through the system. I thought it would come back with petty priors, drugs, vagrancy, the usual things you see with homeless people." Dante swallowed. "But that is not what we got." This time Marcus turned. Dante held the tablet out to him, the screen glaring in the dim corridor. Red text flashed at the top of the page. "Flagged by DOJ. Level 5 clearance. Level 5. That was the kind of security designation reserved for federally protected witnesses or extremely classified medical files. Not something a street drifter was supposed to have. Marcus took the tablet, scrolled down to the details, and he went still. On the screen was a photograph of a woman so beautiful it stole the breath, shiny brown hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, a spotless white doctor's blouse, a bright, confident smile, green eyes, vivid as emerald. It was her, the woman lying on that operating table, but it was the version from 3 years ago, before life had ground her down into a gaunt shadow on the streets. Dr. Vivian Marie Cross, 27 years old, 24 when the photo was taken, a cardiovascular surgeon, one of the youngest ever granted a license to practice across the United States, graduated from Johns Hopkins with top honors, completed residency at the Mayo Clinic, accepted at Northwestern Memorial, one of Chicago's leading hospitals, a medical genius, a rising star, a radiant future, and according to the record, dead. Marcus scrolled further. 3 years ago. A fire at her home in Lincoln Park, a body found in the rubble, burned so black it could not be identified by the naked eye. Identity confirmed through dental records. The case closed. Conclusion: an accident caused by an electrical short. But there was a small line at the bottom of the page, flagged red by the system. Dr. Vivian Cross's dental records had been accessed and altered 2 days before the fire. Someone had changed the file before she died. Someone had planned it. Someone wanted to make sure the body in the blaze would be identified as her. Marcus lifted his gaze to the operating room doors, where the lights still blazed, where the doctors were still trying to save the woman the world believed had died 3 years ago, a top surgeon. Marcus's voice was dull and heavy, like stone scraping stone. "Fakes her death and lives like a beggar for 3 years on my streets." He turned to Dante, cold dark eyes colder than ever. Who wanted her dead that badly? Dante shook his head. No answer. A hard silence settled over the hallway. The USB in Marcus's pocket seemed to grow heavier by 1,000 pounds. What did it hold? What secret was powerful enough that a woman who had everything would abandon it all, live like a ghost, and still protect it for 3 long years. The operating room doors burst open. The lead surgeon stepped out, pulled down his mask, his face slick with sweat but edged with relief. She is alive. Marcus let out a breath, not realizing until that moment that he had been holding it. 4 bullets. We removed 3. The 4th is too close to the spine for us to touch right now. But it is not an immediate threat to her life. She needs time, but she will make it. The doctor paused, his expression shifting from relief to something grave. But there is something you need to see. What is it? What we found on her. The doctor looked Marcus straight in the eye. Those 4 bullets today were not the first time she has faced death. That woman has been through hell before she ever came to your streets. 3 a.m, Marcus's phone vibrated. Dante, boss. I cracked the USB. Marcus was still sitting in the chair beside the glass of the recovery room, not having closed his eyes for even a second since the surgery ended. He stood, his joints popping from holding the same position too long. I'm coming down. He took the elevator to the basement, where Dante had set up a makeshift workroom with 3 computer screens and every kind of decryption gear. Dante's face looked drained beneath the screen's bluish glow, and Marcus knew at once that whatever lived inside that USB was not good news. Show me, Dante clicked, and the first screen filled with a video clip. The image shook slightly, clearly filmed in secret from a concealed vantage point. In the frame stood a man around 30, blonde hair, sharp angles to his face, standing in a dark alley. He wore an expensive dress shirt, a Rolex glittering on his wrist. Facing him was another man whose features could not be clearly seen, holding out a leather briefcase. The blonde man opened it, checked the stacks of cash inside with a quick, practiced glance, nodded, then shook the other man's hand. The video ended. The blonde man, Marcus said, voice flat. Who is he? Dr. Ryan Caldwell. Dante pulled up another file. Her husband, or more precisely, her ex-husband. They married 4 years ago, 1 year before she died. Marcus stared at the document on the screen. Gambling debts, $2,300,000, underground casinos, sports betting, high-stakes poker. Ryan Caldwell had lost everything and owed an enormous sum. But what made Marcus stop breathing was the line naming the creditor. The Benedetti family. New York. Benedetti. The name hit Marcus like a bucket of ice water thrown straight into his face. Victor Benedetti, the New York Mafia boss. The Valenti family's sworn rival for 3 generations. The one who had tried to kill Matteo this afternoon. There's more, Dante said, his voice tight. He opened a string of emails extracted from the USB. Marcus skimmed. Exchanges between Ryan Caldwell and an anonymous email address. The goods will be delivered as agreed. She knows nothing. Make sure she stays intact. Boss wants her to work, not to be a toy. Understood. We'll slip sedatives into her drink tonight. The handoff location stays as arranged. Goods. That was what they called her. Ryan Caldwell had sold his wife to the Benedettis to pay off his gambling debt. Last file, Dante said, voice nearly a whisper. Boss should listen to this. An audio recording. Dante pressed play. Vivian's voice filled the still room, trembling but clear, as if she were trying to hold herself steady while the world collapsed around her. If someone finds this, I don't know where to begin. My husband sold me. Ryan sold me to the Benedetti Mafia to pay off his gambling debt. My name is Vivian Cross. I am a cardiovascular surgeon. I don't know if I will survive. I don't know who will hear this, but if you are hearing it, please. A door slammed hard. Footsteps. Vivian's scream, raw with terror. Then silence. The recording ended. Marcus stood motionless, cold, dark eyes locked on the screen that had gone black. The pieces began to slide into place, forming a grotesque picture. 3 years ago, Ryan Caldwell sold his wife to the Benedettis to settle his debt. Benedetti took her, tortured her, maybe meant to force her to serve as the organization's private doctor. Somehow she escaped, but she had to fake her death to stay alive. 3 years drifting through the streets like a ghost. And today, Benedetti sent someone to assassinate Matteo. The same enemy, the same thread. Vivian was the missing piece tying both events together. Find Ryan Caldwell. Marcus's voice was so cold the air in the room seemed to thicken. I want to know what air he's breathing, where he's sleeping, what he's doing. Dante swallowed, typed a few keys. Seconds later he looked up, his face bloodless. Boss. He's in Chicago. What? Ryan Caldwell. He's not in New York anymore. He moved to Chicago 6 months ago. Dante hesitated, as if he did not want to go on. And he's working for Benedetti, right here, in your city. 3 days later, Vivian opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was white. Pure white. A white ceiling, white lights, white walls. Not Chicago's dirty gray sky, not a shelter made of flattened cardboard, not faint stars behind the city's veil of smoke and dust. Her heart kicked into a frantic, uneven rhythm. Who took her? They found her. Benedetti. Ryan. 3 years running, 3 years living like a ghost, and now they had found her. She tried to sit up, survival instinct screaming in her head that she had to run, to hide, to disappear. But her body betrayed her. Pain tore from her shoulder down into her back as if someone were carving hot knives through her flesh, line after line. She collapsed into the pillow, breathing hard, sweat breaking across her forehead. Then memory slammed into her. The black sedan, the gun barrel, the little boy with the Captain America comic book, 4 shots. Blood. So much blood. She remembered throwing herself in. She remembered the bite of bullets ripping through meat. She remembered curling around the boy, shielding him with her body. After that, darkness. Lie down. You took 4 rounds. The voice came from the corner of the room, low and cold as stone. Vivian turned her head, the pain nearly dragging her back into unconsciousness, but she clenched her teeth and held on. A man was sitting in a chair in the dark corner. Big, black suit, cold dark eyes fixed on her without blinking. She recognized him, the man who had stepped out of the armored Escalade, the boy's father. The boy, Vivian rasped, her throat rough from days of silence. My son is alive. The man stood, stepping out of the shadows. Because of you. Silence stretched through the room. The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm, the only sound filling the space between them. Then he spoke, his voice without the slightest wavering. Who are you, Dr. Cross? Vivian went still. The secret she had carried for 3 years, the name she had buried along with the burned-out house in Lincoln Park, now sat on the tongue of a mafia boss. She could deny it. She could pretend she did not understand. She could play the part of a confused homeless woman. But looking into those eyes, Vivian knew it would be useless. He already knew. He knew everything. And instead of fear, instead of begging, instead of trembling the way she had 3 years ago in Benedetti's hands, Vivian met his gaze with calm. 3 years on the street had stripped everything from her. Reputation, money, identity, even fear. When you have reached the bottom of the abyss, when there is nothing left to lose, there is nothing left to be afraid of. You saw the USB. It was not a question. Yes. Then you know I am not a threat to you. Marcus tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if weighing the woman in front of him all over again. I know Benedetti wants you dead. The enemy of my enemy. I am not your ally, Mr. Valenti. Vivian cut in, her voice weak but steady. I am only someone who does not want to see children die. Marcus did not move. 10 years. 10 years in this world. No one, not a single soul, dared to speak to him in that tone. No pleading, no shaking fear, no flattery, no calculation. This woman, who had lost everything, who had taken 4 bullets, who lay in a hospital bed with a body carved by torture scars, was looking at the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago as if he were an ordinary man, no more, no less. Marcus pulled a chair to her bedside and sat. For the first time in a very long time, he did not give an order. He asked, Tell me, everything. Vivian looked up at the ceiling, her green eyes empty, as if she were staring through the plaster to see the past again. When she began to speak, her voice was strangely flat, without a flicker of emotion, as though she were telling someone else's story. Marcus understood. It was self-protection. The only way to describe hell without letting it swallow you whole a second time. I met Ryan 4 years ago. At a medical conference. Vivian began. He was charming, confident, intelligent. We fell in love. We married within 18 months. I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. She paused, swallowed. I did not know he was addicted to gambling. He hid it well. Business trips, nights coming home late, money disappearing from our shared account. I was too busy with patience to notice, or maybe I did not want to notice. Silence stretched for a few seconds. One night, I woke up to noise. 3 men in my house, masks, guns, and Ryan. Her voice slipped for a fraction of a second before returning to normal. Ryan stood behind them. He looked at me and said, You are the only valuable thing I have left. Marcus said nothing, but his jaw clenched so hard the muscles stood out under his skin. They handed me to Benedetti. 2 weeks in a warehouse out in the suburbs. They wanted me to be the organization's private doctor, to patch up their people. No questions, no records. I refused. Vivian closed her eyes. They convinced me. Acid, knives, broken bones. They did not want to kill me. They wanted me to hurt. They thought pain would break my will. She opened her eyes and looked straight at Marcus. It did not break it, and when they realized that, they decided to finish it. Kill me. Burn the body. Blame an electrical accident. Ryan would take the insurance money and go on with his life as if I had never existed. But you lived, Marcus said, his voice low. The vehicle taking me to the disposal site got into an accident. A truck ran a red light. Vivian almost laughed, but what came out was dry and bitter. Fate, with a cruel sense of humor. I crawled out of the wreckage while the driver and the escort were unconscious. I ran. I ran until I could not run anymore. You did not call the police? With these wounds on my body, with my dental records already altered, with a mafia organization hunting me? Vivian shook her head. I lost part of my memory after the crash. It took months before I remembered who I was, and when I did, I understood that Vivian Cross was dead. She had to be dead. That was the only way I could live. 3 years on the streets, Marcus said. 3 years, Vivian confirmed. Where no one looks, where no one sees. Invisibility was the only thing that protected me. The room sank into a heavy silence. Marcus stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the Chicago night sky. Why did you save my son? He asked without turning back. You did not know who he was. You did not know who I was. You could have died. I saw a child about to die. Vivian's voice was small, but certain. I once swore I would save people. The Hippocratic Oath. That was the only thing I could still remember about who I was during those 3 years of lost memory. Not my name, not my past, only the instinct to save a life. Marcus stayed silent for a long time. His shoulders were rigid beneath the black suit. When he turned back, those cold, dark eyes were not entirely cold anymore. There was something else in them, respect and resolve. You will stay here, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, until I finish Benedetti. Course. 1 week later, Vivian was strong enough to leave the hospital. She was still weak, her right shoulder bound and immobilized, every step pulling a dull ache from the wounds in her ribs and back. But she had survived 4 bullets. She had survived 3 years on the streets of Chicago. A car ride was nothing. The armored Escalade carried her out of the city, through tree-lined roads, heading north toward Lake Forest. When the vehicle stopped at the gates of the Valenti estate, Vivian could not hold back a slow exhale. 74 acres. Grass still green even in the heart of winter. A classic Italian-style villa with tall white stone columns. A red-tiled roof, arched windows. A marble fountain at the center of the courtyard. Beautiful enough to steal your breath, but cold enough to steal it too. No sound of children laughing. No fresh flowers on the window ledges. No sign of life beyond the bodyguards stationed at every corner. This house was wealthy, and it was lonely. A woman around 60 stood waiting at the front door, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, a face lined with age, but eyes warm as embers in winter night. She wore a black housekeeper's uniform, yet her smile held nothing formal. You must be Vivian, she said, her voice warm with a hint of Spanish. I am Mrs. Rosario, the housekeeper of the estate. I have prepared a room for you in the east wing, quiet and full of light. If you need anything at all, you call for me. Vivian nodded, not yet able to speak, when Mrs. Rosario stepped forward and took her arm. Careful on the steps, daughter. Oh, at last there is a woman in this house. 4 years of nothing but men with guns, and not one of them knows how to arrange a vase of flowers properly. Vivian could not stop a small smile, her first in many days, but the smile had barely formed before a shout burst from inside the house. Her, Papa, she saved me, she's here. Mateo came flying out the front doors like a little whirlwind, black curls bouncing, brown eyes blazing. He ran straight toward Vivian, with the fearless speed of a 5-year-old who believed nothing in the world could hurt him. He meant to throw his arms around her, but stopped short when he saw Vivian wince, her hand lifting on instinct to guard the wound in her ribs. Mateo went still, half a step away, his wide eyes like 2 glossy marbles slowly filling with water. I'm sorry, he whispered, his lower lip trembling. You're hurt. Because of me. Because of me, you got shot." Vivian's heart clenched as if someone had crushed it in a fist. She knelt down, despite the pain tearing from shoulder to spine. She needed to look this child in the eye. She needed him to understand. "It isn't your fault, Mateo," she said, her voice gentle but sure. "It is never your fault. I'm glad you are safe. That is what matters most." Mateo stared at her, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I have nightmares," he said, voice breaking. "Every night I see blood. Your blood. I'm scared you'll die. I'm scared you'll leave like Mama." Vivian felt her heart shatter. This child was only 5. 5 and already without a mother. 5 and already having watched someone get shot right in front of him. 5 and carrying a fear that many grown men could not bear. "I will be here," Vivian said, lifting her hand to wipe his tears away. "I promise." From a distance, standing in the hallway shadows, Marcus watched. He watched Vivian kneel before his son. Despite the pain, despite wounds that had not yet healed, he watched her wipe Mateo's tears, heard her promise to stay. For 4 years, many people had promised Mateo. Nannies promised, then left because they could not bear the pressure of living in a mafia house. Relatives promised, then vanished out of fear. But for the first time, Marcus believed a promise made to his son. Mateo took Vivian's hand, his tiny palm fitting neatly into her thin one. "Come with me," the boy said, tugging her toward the doors. "I'll show you my room. I have lots of comic books. Do you like Captain America? I have Iron Man too." For the first 2 weeks, Vivian barely left the bed. The wounds in her shoulder and back still ached every time she moved. And the Valenti family's private physician came to check on her every other day, repeating again and again that she needed absolute rest. But Vivian was not alone. Every afternoon after school, Mateo would race into her room with a stack of comic books in his arms. He would climb onto the bed, sit cross-legged beside her, and begin to read. He read all wrong, words tangled, pronunciation a mess, sometimes inventing entire lines of dialogue because he did not understand the letters. But the seriousness on that tiny face made Vivian lose her composure. She laughed. The sound escaped her throat for the first time in 3 years, rough and unfamiliar, as if her body had forgotten how to make that kind of noise. Mateo looked up, his eyes blazing bright. "You laughed. You really laughed." And the boy laughed too, his clear laughter ringing through the room. In the 3rd week, Vivian began to walk again. The first steps were slow and painful, but Mateo stayed patiently at her side, his small hand gripping hers as if he feared she might fall. He led her through the vast gardens, describing every corner like a professional tour guide. "Mama used to sit here and read." Mateo pointed to the stone bench beneath an old oak tree. "Over there I hide my toys, but Papa knows everything already," he whispered, as if sharing a great secret. Vivian listened, and in each scattered story from a 5-year-old, she saw the outline of a woman who had once loved this child with her whole heart. In the 4th week, family dinner became routine. The large dining room held a long table with space for 12, but only 3 seats were filled. Marcus at the head, Mateo on his left, Vivian on his right. They ate in silence, but it was no longer a cold silence. It was the silence of people learning how to grow used to one another's presence. Mrs. Rosario noticed everything. She noticed Marcus beginning to come home earlier, no longer staying at the office until midnight the way he used to. She noticed the nights Vivian had nightmares, screams spilling from her room at 2 or 3 in the morning. And she noticed Marcus, instead of sleeping, sitting in the hallway outside Vivian's door until the sounds stopped. He did not go in. He did not knock. He only sat there, in the dark, like a silent night watchman. And when dawn came close, he would stand, go back to his own room as if nothing had happened. One weekend afternoon, Vivian stood at the window of her room and looked down into the garden. Marcus was there with Mateo. They were playing ball. Or rather, Marcus was pretending he could not catch the wild throws his son kept sending so Mateo could shout in victory. And then Vivian saw something she had never seen. Marcus smiled, not the polite smile from meetings, not the false smile in front of business partners, but a real smile, melting the ice from his stone face, making him look 10 years younger. Vivian stood there, her hand resting against the cold glass, and realized her heart was beating faster than normal. 2 in the morning, the pain in Vivian's back jerked her awake. The 4th bullet was still lodged near her spine, and on cold nights like this one, it reminded her it was there with a dull, unending ache. She lay staring at the ceiling for a while, knowing she would not be able to fall asleep again. Instead of tossing uselessly, she slipped on a robe and stepped out of her room. The Valenti estate at night was silent as an abandoned castle. Moonlight filtered through the tall glass windows, laying silver bands across the marble floor. Vivian walked the hallway with no real destination, only wanting something, anything, to distract her from the pain. She stopped before a heavy oak door at the end of the West Wing corridor. The library. Mrs. Rosario had mentioned it, saying there were thousands of books collected since Marcus's great-grandfather. Vivian pushed the door open and froze. The room was not empty. Firelight from the hearth danced across shelves that rose all the way to the ceiling, and between two leather armchairs, Marcus sat with a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes fixed on a photograph hanging above the fireplace. Vivian meant to retreat, but Marcus spoke without turning. "Come in. I don't bite." His voice was low and a little rough, as if he had been sitting here a long time and these were the first words he had spoken in hours. Vivian hesitated for a second, then stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She moved closer and looked up at the photograph Marcus had been staring at. A woman, long black hair, glossy and flowing, warm brown eyes, exactly like Mateo's, a gentle smile that lit the entire frame. Beautiful, beautiful in the way that makes you want to smile back. Isabella. She knew she was going to die, Marcus said suddenly, still not turning. Vivian stood still, saying nothing. Cancer. End stage. By the time they found it, it had spread. He took a sip of whiskey, his throat shifting as he swallowed. The doctors said if she started treatment right away, she might have lived 2 more years, but she was pregnant. Chemotherapy would have killed the baby. Vivian understood at once. Her heart tightened. She chose Mateo. She chose Mateo, Marcus repeated, his voice cracking on the last word. She lived long enough to give birth, to nurse him for 3 months, to watch him open his eyes and smile for the first time. Then she was gone. He drank again, a long pull. I was in New York handling business when she went. A deal. An important deal, I told myself. More important than sitting beside my wife in her final hours. The bitterness in his voice was so thick Vivian could almost touch it. She quietly sat in the chair across from him, saying nothing, only listening. Sometimes silence is what people need, more than any comfort you can offer. I don't know how to be a father, Marcus went on, his eyes still locked on the photograph. Isabella did. She knew how to hold Mateo when he cried, how to sing him to sleep, how to make him laugh, and me. He let out a bitter, humorless sound. I only know how to protect him, keep him safe, kill anyone who dares threaten him. That is all I have. Silence stretched. The fire in the hearth crackled softly. Then Vivian spoke, her voice gentle but certain. Protecting is also loving. Marcus turned to look at her, those cold, dark eyes for the first time not cold, but filled with surprise. Sometimes it is the only way we know how to love, Vivian continued, meeting his gaze. Not everyone knows how to say sweet words or hold someone at the right moment, but being willing to stand between the person you love and every danger in the world, that is love. Mateo knows that. I see the way he looks at you. He knows. Marcus stared at her for a long time, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Not the homeless woman he had carried away. Not Benedetti's victim. Not Dr. Cross with the tragic past. But Vivian. Only Vivian. You're different than what I expected, Dr. Cross, he said, his voice far softer than before. Vivian, she replied, a small smile flickering across her mouth. Call me Vivian. They sat there in the warm firelight, saying nothing more. The whiskey in Marcus's glass slowly drained away. The book Vivian had meant to find was forgotten. Outside the windows, the sky shifted from black to gray, then to a pale pink. They did not touch each other. Not a handhold, not a shoulder brush, but when the first light of the new day slipped through the curtains, they both knew something had changed. A wall had fallen, and neither of them wanted to build it again. 1 week after that night in the library, everything changed in an instant. Vivian was sitting in the living room reading to Mateo when a scream carried in from the front courtyard. She heard pounding footsteps, frantic shouts, and someone calling Marcus's name. She told Mateo to stay in the room, then ran outside. The sight in front of her froze her for a second. A bodyguard, she remembered his name was Tony, lay on the stone ground, blood pouring from a deep, gaping wound in his abdomen. 2 other guards were trying to press their hands over it to stop the bleeding, but the blood kept surging between their fingers. Tony's face was white as paper, his lips gray, his eyes already beginning to dull. "The ambulance is 20 minutes out," someone yelled, voice thick with desperation. "He doesn't have 20 minutes. Call a helicopter. Call someone." Panic. Everyone was panicking. Men trained to stay calm in any situation were panicking because they did not know what to do. They knew how to shoot, how to fight, how to kill, but they did not know how to save. And then a voice rose, clear and commanding, cutting straight through the noise. "Move." Vivian stepped forward, her eyes already sweeping the wound and assessing the situation in less than 2 seconds. A deep stab, likely hitting the liver or an artery. Massive blood loss. He had at most 10 minutes before his heart stopped. Not enough time to wait for an ambulance. Not enough time to wait for anyone. Only her. Gauze. Antiseptic alcohol. Needle and thread. Regular is fine. A flashlight. A sharp knife. "Bring it here. Now," she ordered, her voice not trembling even once. The guards stared at one another for a heartbeat, then sprinted off, as if their own lives were on the line. Mrs. Rosario rushed over with a first aid kit. Another guard brought a tactical flashlight. Someone found sewing needle and thread in the laundry room. Vivian dropped to her knees beside Tony, her hands already drenched in antiseptic alcohol poured by Mrs. Rosario. She looked into the wound, and everything around her disappeared. No estate, no panicked bodyguards, no 3 years wandering the streets. Only her, a patient, and a wound that had to be handled. She took the knife and cut wider through the torn shirt to reach the injury more clearly. Blood spurted. She pressed gauze hard, located the source of the bleeding. A small artery had been severed. Lucky. If it had been the aorta, he would already be dead. Vivian's hands moved fast but precise, like a dancer performing a routine practiced 1,000 times. She pinched the vessel with her fingers, tied it off with thread, controlled the bleeding, stitched the muscle layers, stitched the skin. Each pass of the needle through flesh came steady and true. Not a tremor, not a hair off. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. When the ambulance arrived, Tony was still alive. His pulse was weak but steady. The wound had been managed, stabilized enough for transport to the hospital. The paramedics stared at the stitches on his abdomen in open astonishment, unable to believe this had been done without professional surgical instruments. Vivian stood, both hands slick with blood, her clothes smeared and stained. She let out a long breath, and when the adrenaline drained away, pain from the old wounds in her shoulder and back crashed over her so hard she nearly collapsed. A hand caught her by the elbow. Marcus. He had been there the whole time, watching it all without speaking a single word. "You're still a doctor," he said, his voice low, and something in it sounded like admiration. Vivian looked down at her bloodied hands, the hands that had once opened hearts, once saved hundreds of patients, then been forgotten on the streets of Chicago for 3 years. "I never stopped being a doctor," she said, tired but calm. "I just forgot for a while." Around them, the security team stood in silence, looking at Vivian with an entirely different gaze. No longer the homeless woman their boss had brought home out of a debt of gratitude. She was the one who had just saved their brother with bare hands and iron will. She was one of them. The warm moment did not last. Dante appeared in the doorway, face tight, phone in hand. "Boss," he said, "urgent. We have news about Ryan Caldwell. He knows she's alive." The bad news came faster than anyone expected. Dante called an emergency meeting that very night, his face so tense that the lines across his forehead seemed to deepen by inches. Security camera footage from the shooting in front of Valenti Financial had been leaked online. Someone inside the police department had sold the video to one of Benedetti's channels, and in that video, Vivian's face was painfully clear as she burst forward to save Matteo. Ryan Caldwell recognized her. 3 years of running, 3 years of living like a ghost, and now the traitor knew she was still breathing. Worse, he knew where she was. "Benedetti has given the order," Dante said, his voice thick and dull. "Take her alive. She knows too much about what they have been doing these past 3 years. They want to know who she has spoken to, what she has said, and then they will kill her." Vivian sat in the meeting room, back straight, her expression oddly calm for someone who had just been told she was being hunted. She had lived with this fear for 3 years. It was not new anymore. It was only an old, hateful companion, returning for a visit. "I have a proposal," she said, cutting through the strained silence in the room. Marcus looked at her and waited. "I will go to the FBI. I will use the USB as evidence. All the transactions, the videos, The emails, the recordings of Ryan and Benedetti, enough to bring his entire empire down. She paused. I will testify only about Benedetti. Not a word about Valenti. Not a word about you or anyone in this organization. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Why? This is how I repay you, Vivian answered, her voice even. You saved my life. You gave me a place to stay. You gave me a chance to live again. This is how I pay the debt. Benedetti falls, Ryan goes to prison, and you are not touched. Marcus was silent for a long time, cold dark eyes on her as if trying to read what lay beneath that calm surface. Then he nodded. Set up the meeting, he told Dante. A safe location, full escort. 2 days later, everything was ready. A secret meeting with the FBI was arranged at a safe hotel in downtown Chicago. 4 bodyguards would go with Vivian, an armored vehicle, the route kept absolutely secret. Everything looked perfect. Vivian stood at the front doors of the estate, a heavy coat on, her brown hair now cut short and neat, no trace left of the homeless woman who had wandered the streets. She looked like a different version of herself, a version trying to reclaim what had been lost. Marcus stood in front of her, both hands in his pockets, his face as unreadable as ever, but his eyes were not cold. For the first time, Vivian saw worry in them. I will be here waiting for you, he said, his voice low. I will come back, she replied. They did not say anything else. They did not need to. Their eyes carried more than any language could hold. Vivian turned away and stepped into the armored vehicle. The convoy left the estate, gliding past the iron gates, disappearing into the tree-lined road. Marcus watched until the last shadow of the cars was gone. 10 minutes later, Marcus's phone vibrated. Dante. Boss, we have a problem. Dante's voice was urgent, tight enough that Marcus could hear his heartbeat through the line. I just checked the surveillance system again. One of the bodyguards who went with Vivian sent an encrypted message 5 minutes before the convoy pulled out. The message went to a phone number registered in New York. Marcus went still. A mole. Yes. But boss. Dante swallowed. The message did not mention Vivian. It mentioned the route. It said the estate would be without its primary protection for the next 3 hours. The blood in Marcus's veins seemed to turn to ice. If the target was not Vivian, it is a trap, Dante said, his voice shaking. But not for Vivian. The real target is. Gunfire exploded from the direction of the estate. Not a single shot. Many. Automatic bursts, as if a war had ignited inside his home. Marcus spun around, cold dark eyes blazing with a horror he had never felt in all of his 36 years. Matteo. The Valenti estate became a battlefield in less than 3 minutes. 8 gunmen, outfitted with heavy weapons, breached the eastern service gate the moment the convoy escorting Vivian vanished from view. They moved like trained ghosts, swiftly disabling the security system and flooding the house from 3 directions at once. The remaining security team fought back hard. Gunfire cracked through marble corridors, bullets biting into walls, glass exploding into glittering shards, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. One by one, men went down, some dead, some gravely wounded, blood spreading red across the pristine white floor. Mrs. Rosario was in Mateo's room when the first shots rang out. The instinct of a woman who had cared for that boy since he was a newborn made her forget herself. She wrapped Mateo tight against her chest, dragged him into the corner, and used her aging body as a shield. When the door was kicked in, and a man in a black mask rushed in, she still did not let go. A bullet tore through her shoulder, yet she held Mateo until a second man wrenched the boy from her arms with brutal force. Mateo's shriek, Mrs. Rosario screaming in despair, then the roar of an engine, and everything sank into a murderous silence. Vivian's convoy turned back the moment the alert came through. She jumped out before the vehicle had fully stopped, her heart pounding wild in her chest, the old pain from her wounds forgotten completely. The sight in front of her froze her. The estate looked as if it had been hit by a bomb. Windows shattered, walls scarred with bullet holes, the bodies of guards sprawled across the courtyard. Mrs. Rosario was being worked on in the grass, blood soaking her white blouse, her face pale but still breathing, still whispering something Vivian could not make out. And Marcus stood in the wrecked living room, phone in hand, his back to her. When he turned, Vivian saw something she had never seen on that stone face. Fear, primitive, absolute fear. The fear of a father who had just lost his only child. His face was white as a corpse, His cold, dark eyes burned with something far beyond anger. It was hell. "They took Mateo," he said, his voice hoarse, as if his throat had swallowed sand. "They took my son." The phone in his hand vibrated. He looked at the screen, jaw clenched, then put it on speaker. Ryan Caldwell's voice filled the ruined room, dripping with a disgusting triumph. "Hello, Valenti. I have what's yours, and you have what's mine. Trade. You touch my son, I'll skin you alive," Marcus roared, voice like thunder. "You will what? Kill me." Ryan laughed, sharp and shrill through the phone speaker. "You will deliver Vivian, alive. Along with the USB and every copy. Warehouse 47, South Side. 6 hours. If not..." A sob broke through the call. Mateo's voice. "Papa. Papa, save me. I'm scared. I'm so scared." "Your son will learn what pain is," Ryan said, his voice cold as ice. "Don't try to play with me, Valenti. 6 hours. The call ended. Silence. Silence heavy as a coffin. Then Marcus exploded. He slammed his fist into the wall, knuckles punching through plaster, blood running down his fingers. He flipped the massive oak table like it was a scrap of paper, wood splintering when it hit the wall. He screamed, the sound ripping his throat raw, echoing through the wreckage like the roar of a wounded beast. Then he stopped. The quiet after the storm was more terrifying than any scream. Marcus stood there, shoulders trembling, blood dripping from his fist, eyes staring into nothing with a coldness Vivian knew was lethal. "I will kill every one of them," he said, his voice low and hollow of feeling. "One by one. I will tear them apart and send them back to New York in separate boxes." Vivian stepped forward and stopped in front of him. "I will go." Marcus's eyes flared. "No. That is your son, Marcus." Vivian did not back away, her voice calm but unshakable. "Mateo is everything you have. I will not let another child die because of me. Not that boy. Not the boy who read comic books to me, who promised he would protect me from monsters in my nightmares." She looked straight into his eyes, green eyes without a tremor of fear. "But I will not go alone, and we will not surrender." She took Marcus's blood-soaked hand and squeezed hard. "We will save them both, together." 5 hours remained before the deadline, and Vivian and Marcus sat in the secret meeting room beneath the estate's basement, building a plan. On the surface, everything would unfold exactly as Ryan demanded. Vivian would go to Warehouse 47 on the south side, deliver herself and the USB in exchange for Mateo. A simple trade, a complete surrender, but that was only the surface. In reality, Dante and 20 of the Valenti family's most elite gunmen would seal the area from the outside. They would move into position before Vivian arrived, hidden in the dark, waiting for the signal. Vivian's assignment was not to surrender. Her assignment was to buy time, to pinpoint Mateo's exact location inside the warehouse, and to create an opening for the rescue team to move. She would not go empty-handed. Hidden in the left sleeve of her coat was a scalpel, its blade stainless steel, something she had asked Mrs. Rosario for before the older woman was transferred to the hospital. It was not a weapon, it was a tool of the trade, but in the hands of a surgeon who knew the precise map of every nerve and blood vessel in the human body, it could be deadlier than any gun. "Your objective is to survive," Marcus said, his voice drawn tight as a wire. "Not to be a hero, not revenge. Survive, and get Mateo out. I'll handle the rest." Vivian nodded, saying nothing. She knew he was trying to convince himself more than he was trying to convince her. 1 hour before the meeting time, Vivian stood in Mateo's room. The room was empty, still messy with comic books the way she had last seen it, still carrying the faint scent of children's soap in the air. On the bed, the worn, stuffed bear Mateo hugged to sleep every night lay abandoned, as if waiting for its owner to return. Vivian picked it up, her fingers brushing the fur worn thin from being loved too hard. Her eyes stung, but she did not cry. She had cried every last tear during those 3 years on the streets. "You will come back," Marcus's voice came from the doorway. Not a question. A statement, an order, a prayer. Vivian set the bear back on the bed and turned to look at him. "I will come back." Marcus stepped into the room and stopped in front of her. In the dim light, the stone hardness of his face held something softer now, something more human. He lifted his hand and rested it lightly against her cheek. A rough hand, calloused, marked with scars, yet touching her with a gentleness she had never imagined he could possess. "When this is over," he said, voice low as a cello in an empty night, "there is something I need to tell you." Vivian looked into those cold, dark eyes, saw the fire burning inside them, and her heart began to beat faster, faster still. She nodded, not trusting her voice if she tried to speak. Marcus lowered his hand, took her hand in his, squeezed for one heartbeat, then let go. The warm moment ended. It was time. Warehouse 47 on the south side was a ruin from Chicago's industrial age. Dull gray brick walls, a rusted metal roof, shattered windows staring out over a vacant lot choked with weeds and trash. When the vehicle stopped at the corroded iron gate, Vivian felt the blood in her veins turn cold. She knew this place. She knew it too well. 3 years ago, she had been imprisoned in this very building. 2 weeks of hell. Acid, knives, broken bones. The laughter of the men who tortured her still echoed somewhere in her memory. Her nightmares wore the shape of this place, the sour, damp stench of this place, the suffocating darkness of this place. But Vivian did not tremble. She was no longer the panicked woman dragged in here 3 years ago. She had died in the fire in Lincoln Park. She had been reborn on the streets of Chicago. She had taken 4 bullets and stood back up. She was different now. And this time, she was not coming here to endure. She was coming here to end it. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle first. Vivian followed. They crossed the vacant lot in silence, the Chicago night wind cutting cold through skin and bone, but neither of them shook. At the massive iron doors of the warehouse, Marcus stopped. He looked at Vivian one last time, cold, dark eyes saying 1,000 things he could not speak aloud. Then he pushed. The metal doors opened with a long, screaming creak, and the darkness inside swallowed them like a monster that had been waiting. Inside the warehouse, the light from industrial bulbs hanging loose from the ceiling carved the space into alternating pockets of brightness and shadow, like a cruel stage set for a play with no mercy. And at the center of that stage, Vivian saw her nightmare standing there in flesh and bone. Victor Benedetti stood waiting, 52 years old, silver hair slicked back, a perfectly tailored gray suit, hands in his pockets with the calm ease of a man holding every winning card. His cold gray eyes swept over Vivian the way you look over merchandise being returned. Beside him was Ryan Caldwell, 3 years without seeing him, and Vivian recognized him at once. He had aged at least 10 years. The blonde hair had gone gray at the temples. His face was hollowed out, his eyes wild with deep shadows underneath, like a man who had not slept in countless nights. He was no longer the charming, confident doctor she had once loved. He was a breathing corpse, the kind of man who sells his soul and never gets it back. But all of that blurred the moment Vivian saw Mateo. The boy sat on an old wooden chair, hands tied behind him, black tape over his mouth, wide brown eyes red from crying. When he saw Vivian and his father, Mateo thrashed in panic, the muffled sound of his cries breaking through like something wounded. Around them stood 10 gunmen, weapons ready, eyes never leaving Marcus and Vivian for even a second. "Vivian," Ryan spoke, his voice dripping with a disgusting triumph. "You look better than the last time I saw you. Washed the street mud off, did you?" Vivian did not look at him. She looked at Mateo, trying to pour calm into the child through her eyes. "It is okay. She is here. It will be okay." "I am here," she said, her voice flat. "Let the child go." Victor Benedetti lifted a hand, stopping Ryan. "USB first." Marcus pulled the USB from his coat pocket and threw it toward Victor. One of Victor's men caught it, plugged it into a laptop, checked what was inside. A few tense minutes passed. Then the man nodded to Victor. "Yes, it is all here. Video, documents, email, recordings." Victor smiled, a smile cold as reptile skin. "Good. Now the girl." Vivian prepared to step forward, but Ryan suddenly raised a hand to block it. "Wait," he said, something unhinged in his voice. Victor frowned, clearly displeased by the interruption. "I want Vivian to come here," Ryan said, eyes locked on her with a sick kind of hunger. "With her own feet. I want her to walk to me." "Ryan," Victor began. "You owe me, Benedetti." Ryan turned to the New York boss, and in that moment Vivian saw the truth of what they were. Ryan was not a partner. Ryan was a dog, and this was the first time the dog had dared to growl at its owner. 3 years ago you promised I would have her. Then she escaped. Then you said she was dead. Then you made me work like a slave to pay the debt. 3 years. Now she is standing here, alive, and I want to see her face when she realizes there is no way out. The silence tightened. Victor looked at Ryan for a long moment, then shrugged as if it was not worth his attention. "Fine. Make it quick." Ryan turned back to Vivian. the victorious grin spreading across his mouth. "Come here, my dear wife. Come to your husband." Vivian walked forward, each step slow, steady, her heel striking the cold concrete in a measured rhythm, every gaze in the warehouse fixed on her, waiting for fear, waiting for tears, waiting for pleading. But Vivian was not afraid. She did not cry. She did not beg. She smiled. A small smile, calm, and so cold the air around them seemed to thicken. Ryan froze, the triumph dying on his lips. "Ryan," Vivian spoke, her voice light as a feather yet sharp as a scalpel. 3 years. 3 years you thought I was dead. 3 years you slept well on my insurance money. And look at you now." She stopped 3 yards from him, green eyes staring straight into his without blinking. "You are still as pathetic as the day you sold me." Ryan's face drained. You think you won?" Vivian cut him off, her calm more frightening than rage. "Look at you. Gray hair, dark eyes, shaking like an addict without his fix. What are you? A dog for Benedetti to kick. A loser clinging to someone else's coattails just to keep breathing." She took one more step, and Ryan flinched back without meaning to. "And me? I lived. I lived through your 2 weeks of torture. I lived through 3 years on the streets. I lived through 4 bullets. And after tonight?" Vivian stopped, her smile colder than the Chicago winter wind. "You will never be free again." Ryan trembled, not from the cold. From the first time in 3 years he was looking at the woman he had betrayed, and realizing she was no longer the weak victim he remembered. She was something far more dangerous. She was a survivor, and a survivor has nothing left to lose. Vivian flicked her eyes toward Marcus, sending a signal so small almost no one would notice. Marcus nodded, the movement nearly invisible. Outside the warehouse, in the dark, Dante and 20 gunmen were ready. Ryan lost control. Vivian's cold calm pierced the thin shell of confidence he had tried to build for himself over the past 3 years. He lunged forward, yanking a gun from his waistband, jamming it toward her head with a trembling hand. "You always thought you were better than me, didn't you?" he roared, the barrel only inches from Vivian's forehead. "Genius doctor, rising star, look at you now. You're nothing, just prey waiting to die." Vivian did not step back. She looked straight into Ryan's eyes, and what she saw almost made her laugh. Fear. Behind the frenzy of rage was the purest fear. "I can see you, Ryan," she said, calm as if she were diagnosing a patient. "Your hand is shaking. Your pupils are dilated. Your breathing is fast and shallow. You're afraid." "I'm not." The lights went out. Darkness dropped over the warehouse like a massive blanket, swallowing everything in an instant. Shouts erupted from every side, footsteps scattering, the metallic click of guns being readied. But Vivian was prepared. From the moment she walked in, she had been counting the number of steps from the door to Matteo's position, counting the distance between herself and Ryan, counting his breath, his heartbeat, in the way he spoke, the way he moved. In that single second of complete darkness, Vivian moved. She drew the scalpel from her left sleeve, the cold steel fitting cleanly into her palm. She did not need to see Ryan. She knew where he stood. She knew the angle of his right arm, where the gun was pointed, and she knew exactly where to strike. Not the heart, not the head. She was a cardiovascular surgeon, not an assassin. She did not come here to kill. She came here to disable the brachial plexus, the nerve bundle at the shoulder, the junction that controls the entire arm. One precise cut in the right place would leave Ryan's right hand permanently useless. The blade slid through skin, through muscle, and met the exact point Vivian had aimed for. One cut. Fast, clean, exact. Ryan screamed, the sound ripping the darkness apart. The gun clattered to the concrete. He collapsed, his right arm hanging at his side like dead weight, fingers twitching out of control. He would never hold a scalpel in that hand again. He would never hold a gun in that hand again. He would live the rest of his life with tonight carved into his body. Emergency lights snapped on, a red glare like spilled blood flooding the warehouse. Vivian had already moved to Matteo, slicing the ropes, ripping the tape from the boy's mouth, pulling his small body tight against her, and using herself as a shield. Gunfire thundered everywhere. Dante's team stormed in from all sides like heralds of death, weapons roaring in their hands. Benedetti's men fired back hard, but they were surprised, overwhelmed, their formation shredded in seconds of chaos. Bullets tore the air, bodies fell, blood stained the gray concrete red. Victor Benedetti, the New York Mafia boss, tried to use the chaos to escape. He ran for the back door, gray suit flaring, his face washed pale with fear. But Marcus was faster, one shot to the knee. Benedetti crumpled, screaming. One shot to the shoulder. He sprawled on the ground, blood streaming, trying to crawl with his one good arm. Marcus stood over him, gun aimed at his head, cold dark eyes colder than any Chicago winter. "You'll live," Marcus said, voice empty of feeling. "To die in prison." The gunfire faded. The groans of the wounded echoed through the red-soaked space. Dante's team had full control. Amid wreckage and bodies, Vivian sat on the cold concrete, holding Matteo tight in her arms. The boy cried, soundless, his small body shaking, his hands gripping her clothes as if afraid that if he let go, she would vanish. "Mama V," he sobbed, voice breaking. "I'm so scared. I'm so scared." Vivian wrapped him tighter, pressed her lips to his hair, tears running down her cheeks without her noticing. "Mama knows," she whispered, trembling but full of love. "Mama's here. Mama's here now." The warehouse sank into silence after the storm. Gun smoke still hung in the air, the smell of powder and blood braided together into something that could make anyone sick. Benedetti's gunmen lay scattered across the floor, some dead, some badly wounded and groaning, some neatly bound, waiting to be dealt with. Victor Benedetti, the New York boss who once made the entire underworld tremble, now lay curled in a corner of the warehouse, arms wrapped around his shattered knee, his mouth never stopping its moan of pain. His empire would collapse after tonight. No one was coming to save him now. And Ryan Caldwell, the traitor, was crawling across the cold concrete, his right arm hanging useless at his side, blood from the shoulder wound pooling beneath him. He was crying, the pathetic crying of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to cling to. Marcus stood over him, gun aimed at his head, cold dark eyes blazing with the fury he had been holding in for hours. "You sold your wife," Marcus said, his voice low and heavy like distant thunder. "You sold her to animals to pay your gambling debt, and then you took my son, my only son." Ryan looked up, face slick with tears and snot, his left hand raised in a pleading gesture. "Please, please spare me. I'm a doctor. I can help you. I can do anything." "Vivian is a doctor too," Marcus cut him off, his voice ice. "She saves people. She just saved one of my men with needle and thread and a flashlight. And you," he bent down, the muzzle touching Ryan's forehead. "You destroy people. You don't deserve to be called a doctor." Marcus cocked the gun. The sharp click rang through the silence like a death bell. Ryan squeezed his eyes shut, body shaking as he waited for the end. "Marcus." Vivian's voice rose, gentle but clear. She had stood, Matteo still in her arms, the boy's head resting on her shoulder, his eyes closed from exhaustion after all the crying. Marcus did not turn, but he did not pull the trigger either. "He deserves to die," Marcus said. "He deserves it." "He does," Vivian answered, stepping closer. "But don't dirty your hands for him. He isn't worth it." Marcus stayed silent, shoulders rigid, finger still on the trigger. Vivian stopped beside him, looking down at Ryan curled on the ground. "Give him to the FBI," she said, calm and certain. "We have the USB as evidence. We have me as a witness. We have the kidnapping of Matteo with complete proof. He will rot in federal prison for the rest of his life." She looked at Ryan, green eyes without mercy, but without hatred either. "Every day he wakes up in a cell, he will know the woman he tried to kill is living the life he craved. A family, love, freedom. And he will have nothing, nothing at all." Marcus turned to look at Vivian, at her eyes, at the steadiness there, at his son sleeping in her arms. Then he looked down at Ryan, trembling under his feet. He lowered the gun. "You live," Marcus said, voice so cold the air seemed to freeze. "Not because I'm sparing you, because she doesn't want me to kill you. You owe her your life a second time. Remember that while you rot in prison." He turned away, not wasting one more second looking at Ryan. "Dante, call the FBI. Package it all up for them. Benedetti, Ryan, evidence, witness, everything." "Understood, boss." Marcus walked to Vivian and Matteo. He looked at his son, the small face peaceful in sleep, then looked at the woman holding him as if he were the most precious thing in the world. He reached out and pulled them both into his arms, his wide embrace wrapped around them, shielding them from the world. "Home," he whispered into Vivian's hair, his voice rough and full of feeling. "Come home with me." They walked out of the warehouse, leaving behind wreckage, blood, and the past. Outside, Snow began to fall, pure white flakes spiraling in the Chicago night wind, laying a clean blanket over the ground. 3 years ago, Vivian had trembled in that cold snow, alone, with nothing but fear and despair. But tonight, in Marcus's arms, with Mateo sleeping safe beside her, she was not cold. For the first time in 3 years, she was not cold. 6 months later, everything was different. Ryan Caldwell and Victor Benedetti stood before a federal court facing a long list of charges: human trafficking, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and countless other crimes. Vivian's USB had dragged into the light. The trial lasted 3 months, drawing national attention, and it ended with life sentences without parole for both men. The Benedetti empire, once feared across all of New York, collapsed like a sandcastle before the tide. Cap regimes ran or surrendered. Assets were seized. Underground operations were dismantled. The name Benedetti became the past. Vivian was removed from the list of the dead. Her medical license was restored after a short investigation proved she was a victim, not a criminal. Dr. Vivian Cross officially returned. But she did not return to glossy hospitals or 5-star clinics for the wealthy. She had a different plan. On a warm, sunlit morning in June, the Cross Valenti Community Health Center officially opened on Chicago's South Side, a free clinic for the homeless and for anyone without health insurance. Funded by an anonymous sum that both the IRS and the FBI knew better than to investigate, Vivian stood at the clinic's entrance in a spotless white coat, her name embroidered over her chest. Dr. Vivian Valenti. She held golden scissors, ready to cut the ribbon, when a small whirlwind burst from the crowd. "Mama! Mama!" Mateo ran into her arms, radiant, wearing a tiny tailored suit that fit him perfectly. Over the past 6 months, the boy no longer had nightmares. He had begun to call her Mama. Not Mama V anymore, just Mama, simple and pure as a child's love. Vivian hugged him, kissed his black curls, and looked up at the man standing behind them. Marcus Valenti in a navy blue suit, a red rose pinned to his lapel, and a smile on his mouth, a smile she had once believed he was incapable of. She cut the ribbon to applause. Reporters snapped photos. City officials gave speeches, but Vivian did not pay attention to any of it. Her eyes had caught a figure at the edge of the crowd. An old man, wild gray hair, clothes old and torn, standing shyly outside the fence, staring at the bright clinic with longing but not daring to step closer. Vivian stepped off the red carpet and walked straight to him. "Hello," she said gently. "I'm Vivian. I used to sleep outside just like you. You don't look well. May I help you?" The old man looked at her, eyes shining with tears. I don't have money." "You don't need money." Vivian smiled and held out her hand. "You only need to come in." She led him into the clinic, where the nurses and doctors were ready to receive him. Before she crossed the doorway, she turned to look back outside. Marcus had Mateo on his shoulders, the boy waving at her with a wide grin. Marcus smiled too, cold, dark eyes warmer than any fire. Family. Vivian smiled and stepped inside, her heart full of something she had forgotten during those 3 years on the streets. She had lost everything: her career, her home, her identity. She had taken 4 bullets. She had lived like a ghost in this city. But looking at the man who loved her and the little boy who called her Mama, Vivian understood she had not lost anything at all. She had only traded a safe life for a meaningful one. She was no longer a ghost on the streets. She was the heart of this city. And for the first time in 3 years, she was home. This story reminds us that even if life pushes you to the deepest bottom, even if you are betrayed by the very person you trusted most, light is still waiting at the end of the tunnel. Vivian did not only survive, she turned pain into strength, turned tragedy into purpose. What is the lesson here? Sometimes losing everything is the way you find what truly matters. Sometimes you have to hit the bottom before you learn how high you can fly. And love, compassion, can come from the places you least expect. If this story touched your heart, if you feel moved, inspired, or simply delighted by Vivian's journey, please hit the like button and share this video with the people you love. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more emotional stories every day. We would truly love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever lived through a moment when you thought you had lost everything, only to find something even better? What do you think about Vivian's choice to forgive instead of taking revenge? Leave a comment below. Share what you feel from the deepest part of your heart. We read and cherish every one of your thoughts. Finally, wishing all of you watching this video abundant health, a joyful life, and peace in every day. Remember that wherever you are in life, there is always hope, always a chance to begin again. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.